Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Good morning, Frank.
Hey, it is a good morning.
How are we doing this week?
I'm doing. My body's freaking killing me. I started a whole new workout, but I'm not, but my body is.
Yep, I know that feeling.
It's funny. I was talking to Karen about that concept of separation, and I'm like. So she's the other day. She said, "Hey, go do this." I'm like, "My legs hurt." She goes, "Yeah, but the real you doesn't." Now get up.
I love that she knows.
I should have never shared that whole concept with her.
I love how she can even put that back on you. That's so awesome.
She puts everything back on me.
Yeah, she's like, "Nice try."
I'm not talking to your legs. I'm talking to your real you. Now go do the
witness yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Witness yourself. That's so awesome. Cheers, Karen. Yeah. Nice work.
Yeah, Karen.
Oh, that's awesome.
She's my guru.
Truly.
How was your week, man?
Oh, it was great. Speaking of being tired, so randomly I got invited to this little event. It was like some sort of client appreciation event, and I got invited to it over the weekend. And I was kind of like, I don't know if
I don't really appreciate my clients.
No, it wasn't me. It was for another broker that I work with.
Yeah.
And it was at Canyon Lake, and so I was like, I should go just make a quick appearance, type of thing.
But Canyon Lake is not a quick appearance. That's
a
drive.
That's it. So I mean, it was far, and I was kind of like, whatever, but. I went, and it turned out to be the most beautiful experience, Frank. It was awesome. I got there because, I thought I'd have to, play a role, be a real estate agent, be a broker, have to talk the talk, and I thought it was just going to be a bunch of people wearing masks and, playing, I play my role, you play your role.
Oh, when you say a mask, like persona mask.
Yeah, persona
mask.
Not like,
yeah, because here in Arizona, we haven't worn masks.
No.
COVID's over.
No. I mean, the persona that we all wear. But I get there, and they had rented 4 jet skis, all these kayaks. So I take off on one of these jet skis, and I jet skied for 2-3 hours.
Yeah.
And I got to go out and take it out by myself, and I'm going through these different coves, and I'm out there and just cruising on the water, and it was so beautiful. I don't know how to explain it other than I had no thought whatsoever. It was me out there on the water, surrounded by these canyons and mountains.
Yeah.
And it was just gorgeous.
Jet skis do that to you.
It was, yeah.
They do.
But then I woke up the next day after riding this for so long, and I don't work out at all.
Yeah.
That's not my thing. I mean, I go for walks in the morning, things like that, but my whole body was sore.
Mike's idea of CrossFit is jet skiing.
Yeah, exactly. That was a heavy workout for me. And so I woke up and I was like, oh my gosh, my whole body was sore from it. So I can relate to the soreness in that sense.
Yeah, right on.
But I am extremely, extremely excited for this week's episode.
Me too.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite spiritual teachers. Just such a wise, individual on a multitude of levels, not just a spiritual sense, even on a, analytical thinking mind sense. Today we're going to be going over a gentleman named Ram Dass, or Richard Alpert, as some may know him.
Yeah, he started as Richard Alpert. Yeah.
Yep, and then kind of got the name Ram Dass from his guru, right?
Yeah, Maharashi. Yeah.
Yep, which is kind of a cool backstory. But Ram Dass was, for me, somebody who really allowed me to understand these Eastern principles from a very Western viewpoint, I guess is the way to say. I can very much so relate to him, him being a Westerner, being raised in a culture very similar to ours, and then finding and experiencing these other realities that are out there. And all happening simultaneously at the same time. And what's so cool about the story of Richard Alpert is kind of how he started in this very proper way. He went out, became a psychologist, worked for Harvard, also worked with Stanford, had this very strong, well-respected life in this third-dimensional reality that we all find ourselves living in. And so it's cool to see the transition he kind of made when he essentially was out and about, and he kept feeling like he was playing a role, no matter what he was doing, And for me, Ram Dass helped me understand these different personas and these roles that we play throughout, our experience. And I think that's why, he had such an impact on me personally.
And what he does brilliantly, it's not that he doesn't tell you to take the veil or the persona off. He's just showing you how to play, to separate from it. When we learn to separate, we play it. We have actually fun playing it. Because he'll even say, even towards the end of his life, he's like, he thought early on that his spiritual life will get rid of all of his anxiety, neuroses, and everything else. And he realized it didn't, none of that. He just now is friends with his neuroses. he's okay with it.
Which is a great way to say it.
Yeah, so when we start to realize that these personas are just who are playing, you put that space between it, you actually enjoy it. You don't try to stop it. So whether you're living in the West here in the United States or throughout Europe or in the East, we're all doing the same thing. Okay. It's just in the West, we really dove into the physicality of the world. We dove into the material world in the objective objects out there. But then there's nothing wrong with that, because anyone, you can have somebody that's worth $1 billion, but it's an experience. If they're attached to it, they're going to drown by that. But someone could drown by $5 as well. There are people that died for $5, and there are people that simply let go of 20 billion. So it's really interesting. So his teachings show you how to just step back and recognize, hey, this is what it is. It's not a big deal.
I like that you mentioned that about the neuroses factor and the different things that, drive us nuts and whatnot, or the things that we focus on, because it's not about getting rid of those.
No.
And that's what he's diving into. You don't have to get rid of anything. You don't have to change. In fact, it's like something that you begin to kind of work with and see as malleable and see as something that doesn't need to affect you. It just is something that's kind of there.
Yeah, it's almost like if you understand it, it's like a tool in the toolbox. You don't get rid of it because, even though as tools become more sophisticated, people are like, oh, I don't need this screwdriver anymore because I got all electrical tools. But then one day I'm like, oh, damn, I wish I had that screwdriver.
Yeah, the power goes out.
Yeah, the battery died. It's like, yeah.
Really wish I had
that screwdriver now. It will always be there for you. But it's knowing how to utilize it, knowing to separate it, and knowing, listen, it's not a part of me. It's just a tool. And when I realized that I could place it and put it in the toolbox, take it out anytime I want. So all these emotions we have into us as personas, they're tools. Mm-hmm. So when I realized that I could contain them, I know when to use them. I don't just wake up. I don't go to sleep with the screwdriver in my hand, like waiting to screw something.
Just waiting.
Yeah, I'll leave that one alone after that. Karen's like, you had to say that, didn't you? I even surprise myself sometimes.
I even surprise myself sometimes.
And she goes to sleep with a hammer in the head and hits me.
Well, let's dive into the first clip. The first clip that I picked for today was when Ram Dass was young. I wanted to make sure we found something,
when he was young.
Yeah, it's cool to see his progress over
I don't
the
even
years,
know what
or
year
his
this
growth.
video. Yeah, I'm not sure what year this video was, but it's.
This was a while ago. It's black and white.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
a while ago.
Yeah. It just shows you, like, if it's black and white, it must have been millennia ago.
So long ago.
Yeah. All right, let's
dive into it.
Check it out.
Now, in our culture, we've been trained for individual differences to stand out. So you look at each person, the immediate hit is brighter, dumber, older, younger, richer, poorer, and we make all these dimensional distinctions, put them in categories, and treat them that way. And we get so that we only see others as separate from ourselves in the ways in which they're separate. And one of the dramatic characteristics of the psychedelic experience is being with another person and suddenly seeing the ways in which they are like you, not different from you, and experiencing the fact, well, yes, indeed, we are brothers in the true sense of that which is essence in you and which is essence in me is indeed one.
What's this do to the free enterprise market system?
Well, what it does, if I understand it right, is it moves the basic motivation from an achievement, competitive, to a collaborative kind of enterprise, which means that I'm not working in order to beat you out, but you and I are working in order to both make it. Now, at this point, I'm aware that you're a separate individual from me. We're separate, but there's something similar. All right. Now, at this point, there is this start to break down of the separation, the separation between us. For example, I might look down, and this is an external hallucination. I will see my body disappear, right? Or see those ways in which I am different become like learned things that I wear, like this sweater. For example, PhD, what does that mean? All right, it means I got a certain kind of education, acquired a certain degree for being more educated than 0.1% of the world's population, or something like that, all right? And that assures me of something or other in society, all right? In fact, it's a garb I wear. If I had the gown and the cap, that would be the external symbol of that same thing, right? Now, that gown is a psychological gown I wear, just like Richard Alpert is a gown I wear. It's an identity that I've taken on. I wasn't born Richard Alpert. I was just born as a human being. And then I learned this whole business of who I am and whether I'm good or bad or achieving or not. All that's learned along the way. And you see all those learned things separate. So you start to have this dissociative experience of where all that you become is awareness, is a point of awareness. That's all that's left. And I remember the first time this happened to me, as professor went and middle class boy went and pilot went and all of my games were like going off into the distance, I got this terrible panic because indeed I was going to cease to exist. And I got the panic, which is the panic that precedes the psychological death, because indeed Richard Alpert was dying at that point. And the panic was, no, stop, I've got to hold on to something so I'll know who I am. And Timothy, the wise old Timothy, always says things like, trust your nervous system.
Dude,
good.
I love that. Trust
Wise
your
old
nervous system.
Timothy.
That's great.
And they're talking about Timothy Leary.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they were colleagues at Harvard University.
Correct.
Oh.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. Him and Timothy Leary worked together. We should actually talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because that was a big part of his awakening experience, at least with psychedelics.
Yeah, I think we were born to awaken. I believe every human being has the opportunity to awake. Some may recognize it. It's very difficult for me to know if people aren't or not, because I only know my experience. I was talking to you earlier about that today. Like, we're told there's 8 billion people on the planet. But yet, as me and Mike we're sitting in my living room and on this quiet street, and I look around, I only see the two of us. I'm like, it's a tough sell to let me know there's 8 billion people on the planet. Mm-hmm. And I'm not denying it. But so when it comes down to, I do not know most people. I've said this before. But yet, when we pull up these different people we're featuring, they're all talking about the connectiveness, the universal understanding of who we are. And the other stuff are just personas that we're attaching to that creates the difference, which is nice. It offers a different perspective. But we really don't know how other people are truly suffering or not. I can only perceive it through my experiences, through my 5 senses. Okay, if I was in that situation, I kind of know how I'd feel because I got close to that. But the truth is, unless I immerse myself, I really wouldn't know, and I couldn't know from that person. They say, walk a mile in a man's shoes, but the thing is, you can't. Why? Because he's wearing them. I can't take his shoes off. He's got them on.
But it's true. In a sense, it's kind of like us measuring and judging a situation. Who are we to say, that level of suffering is worse or better?
Yeah, and
different level of suffering.
Yeah, and what he talks about is, as everything's fleeting, how do you measure something? Do you measure your time when you were in high school, or pre-adolescence, or grade school, or now? and then say this is who I was. Like no, like but we're quick to do it. Like one instant in a clip of someone's life. Let's take like Will Smith, what happened a couple of weeks ago, and everyone will judge him for that for a very long time until he does something else or he fades away and like, oh yeah, this guy Will Smith, he started this way. Oh, his career went downhill once he did. So we've taken a little synopsis and a judgment on somebody. And I'm not saying you shouldn't judge. I'm not saying you should not judge. It doesn't matter what you do. But realize that's a little blimp in time that was frozen. It was frozen. And when we hold on to a judgment of that, and, Ram Dass talks about this, our life starts to flee faster. Like you don't notice a river moving quickly until you grab onto a branch that overhangs the river, and the branch is creating some bit of understanding of stagnation based on the movement of the river, and then you feel the pressure of the river. It's like, wow. Now, it's interesting. It's cool to feel the power, but after a while, your arm will give out, and that's where the production of suffering comes in. But if you've never grabbed a branch, you're constantly moving. You can't measure where you are. You're just constantly moving. So it's a very interesting.
And that's that flow.
Yeah, it is the flow. Again, but unless I grabbed the branch, I wouldn't understand the flow either. Mm-hmm. So persona and diving into it, having the attachment of it, and then letting it go is all. It's all part and parcel of it. Kind of like what he was talking about.
Well, in the beginning when he talked about, I love how he said, we categorize everybody. That's, how we have been learned and taught, this person's this way, they must be like this. And then that's how we picture them in our head. And then we roll with that. And this is where, stereotypes, racism, all sorts of different things kind of come from. It comes from a multitude of different megaphones from the media, from parents, from family, friends, you name it. And then we kind of live by this narrative. And he takes that and he talks about how this has been used in a sense to create this idea of competition, create this idea of that we must achieve. And in fact, we're much more part of a collaborative, community. And when Frank and I were talking earlier, that's something that you had brought up. You're like, who am I to say, there's 8 billion people in this world, et cetera? Who are we to say that most people are focused on competition and that most are focused on achievement, when in fact this entire world is collaborating at this time? And so it is where we put our awareness, where we put our attention, that we begin to see things expand, or we see more and more of them. Yeah. So, Frank, you just briefly mentioned, clients are still showing up to, appointments. The garbage truck still picked up the trash. Yeah. The wind is still blowing. We live in
the sun still comes up.
Such a collaborative world. To think that we only live in a world of achievement and competition is just false. It's just we see so much projection of that from, media.
In my analysis of that, and again, I could be off on this, why we notice the competition, why we notice the wars, why we notice the violence, it's because it doesn't happen as much as we think. So if you were out like in a field of just trees and just natural nature, and then someone stuck a wrought iron sculpture in there, you would notice that. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't notice the trees anymore. Why? Because it doesn't fit into the landscape. Although it melds into the landscape, all of a sudden it stands out because, that didn't grow out of the ground. Somebody placed it there in our perspective, how we look at it. And I think what happens is because the natural nature of all of life is collaborative. So when violence does occur, we notice it. So, again, keep bringing it back to Will Smith, but how many other things did you talk about that happened that night at the Oscars? Because it was like a, say, 2-hour show. I could be a little less, I don't know. But yet we're talking about that one instance. Why? Because it stood out.
Less than 1 minute.
Now, if everyone got up and smacked Chris Rock, Chris Rock's like, why'd you bring that? But it would have been like the norm. And then the woman with the beautiful dress, like, oh my God, you see, she wore a beautiful dress. And so something tells me that violence and competition are far less on this planet than collaboration, because what we're not used to stands out, and what we stand out, we talk about.
I think that's a great point.
Now, if we focus and we're like, oh, how do we, but if the more we focus on it, the more we give attention to it, the physics shows the more it grows. So when we give our attention back to, okay, I see that wrought iron piece, so I'm going to go back and look at the trees again. And all of a sudden, after a while, you don't notice the wrought iron, or you notice the wrought iron just as much as you notice the trees. It blends in. It's like, wow, okay. And that's our consciousness. So,
and that's what we're saying, be aware of.
Yeah, and Ram Dass teaches us that. It's like, so what? You have part of your persona is neuroses, neurotic, anger. So what? But when you actually witness it and separate from it, now you're actually controlling it like the screwdriver. I need the screwdriver. Well, you know where it is. You don't just end up with the screwdriver in your hand. Unless you're grabbing the toolbox. Like, oh, that's not what I wanted. I wanted the Phillips, not the flathead. So that's what happens. But as we start to sit back and listen to like people like Ram Dass, it gives you that little space of breathing room to like, wow, okay, I can be this character, but I am not the character. I'm in the world, but not of the world. I am in the character. I am the persona, but I am not the persona itself.
I love that you bring up that quote. That's actually in the next video clip.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, he actually kind of talks about that. Yeah, I was going to say that's at the end of the next one.
Is this the video clip right here?
Yeah. Do you want to? Should we dive into that since you're?
Yeah.
Since you already said that.
Give a segue.
Well, I was going to say that was perfect. That phrase, is that from the Bible? Is that what Jesus said?
That's what Jesus said. Yeah.
Yeah. Be in the world, not of the world, and that is so powerful because that's the truth. That's what we're all experiencing. Hey, what's going on? Accept it exactly how it is. Don't try to change anything about it. It is what it is. That's not being of the world. Being of the world is when things outside of you, you're saying have a sense of control over you.
And the original phrase of "it is what it is," because I know like a lot of people get annoyed with that, but the original phrase of "it is what it is" not "thy will, but thy will be done." You could translate the same thing. Like, it's just happening. Now I have the ability to perceive it, and this is what Ram Dass talks about. I can perceive it in the way I choose to perceive it. So why would I be like, oh, that person's wrong? Because once that person's wrong, it's no longer, collaboration ends. And in physics, collaboration is the only thing that's expansive, and competition is a fragmented understanding. So eventually, even the most fiercest competitor that's at the top of the game won't be such a place. They get to a certain age, they're like, oh shit. But yet, that's when you start like, oh shit, I got to start becoming friends with people now because I'm about to go downhill. But
that's so funny.
Yeah.
Because that's what the universe is. It's the projection of our desire systems. You're living in an entirely different universe than I am. And our universes are determined by what our karma is, by what our attachments or clingings are. If you and I go through a small town and you're hungry, you'll notice pizza parlors and donut shops and restaurants. And if I go through the town and there's a strange sound in my engine, which there often is, I'll notice repair shops and gas stations. And at the end of the town, you and I really went through different towns. So from my point of view, the world of being in the world but not of the world is a series of experiences that are given to me in order to awaken out of the illusion of my own separateness. Okay, because I am not this body. I am in this body, and this is part of my incarnation, and I honor it, but that isn't who I am.
Yeah, I like that one.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, it is cool. And it is. It's kind of like separating and understanding it. But it's funny because like that's what he talked about. I thought was very interesting. Was like if you go into a town and you're hungry, you notice the restaurants. But if you're looking for clothing, you notice the clothing shops. Mm-hmm. So, and in quantum physics, they say this: whatever you give your attention to will then appear and it exists. But what you don't will disappear for you. Mm-hmm. Like it just goes away. And people have a tough time with that. But I'm like, yeah, but if you're not looking at the moon, it doesn't exist for you, but it exists for somebody else. But you think it's just hanging out there. But
that used to freak Albert Einstein out. He used to say, he was like, I really like to think that
It's
like
there.
the moon is still there even when I'm not looking at it. But
that's
to
our
be honest,
So Albert Einstein, again, I'm not going to speak for Albert Einstein. What he really meant is, I just pray to God I don't forget about the moon.
but without the attention and awareness there, does it exist?
Yeah.
Quantum physics says no.
It doesn't exist
this
in the
and
physical realm. Yeah. So it is very interesting. So it's very difficult to prove or disprove.
Yep.
And the reason being is, like the little child that puts his hands over the eyes feels that they disappeared. But to the person looking at the child with the hands over the eyes, like they did not disappear. But what it is it's not that they think they disappeared. You disappeared from them because they covered their eyes. So it's a misconception. It's like, oh, they're hiding. I'm like, no, you're hiding. Mm-hmm. They're creating your hiding by doing this. So now Mike is hiding from me. Mm-hmm. And that's really what it is. So, they weren't hiding, you were hiding.
My favorite thing about that clip was when he said, the universe is a projection of our desires. And that is. Your desires don't necessarily need to be preferential. Your desires can also be non-preferential, And so...
Well, the circumstance situation that formed from your desires.
Where you're keeping that attention, what you're thinking about, that is a desire. And so if it's on a very negative, fear, scared, anxious type of path, you're very much so going to experience fear, anxiety, etc. And so that's like what he's kind of getting at is he's like, what are you looking for? When you are experiencing this reality and you know that what we focus on, what we think about, is ultimately how we, where our attention goes, then you can be very kind of, you can move and shift your consciousness essentially to a more preferential viewpoint. To what you'd like to experience and like what you would like to see. So if we know that, okay, if I'm hungry, I'm going to see more restaurants, etc. Or if my car's making a weird noise, I'm going to see more of this. So naturally, we can begin to kind of steer that awareness by being aware of what's going on. By knowing that, okay, what I focus on, etc., is how I'm ultimately going to experience this universe. And I love how he said that so simply.
Yeah, and the other cool thing about that, like understanding preference, as we get greater at this, everything we do becomes our preference.
Yeah.
Because like the idea of a preference is a past experience. So like I prefer to eat pizza over broccoli, say. And maybe my understanding of broccoli is when I was a child because my parents made me eat it. And I think in the act of... No choice. It was where the issue came from, or it was just my taste buds were different. The whole culmination of things. But where pizza was, it just turned out, and I had it, so I prefer it over this. But as life goes on, I don't really prefer anything over anything. But I'm led to different type of preferences and expanding. Again, this thing I still hold on to stuff, right? Pizza's still great.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, and I wouldn't compare pizza to broccoli anymore, so I don't have a problem with that. It's just if I like to put broccoli on pizza is a little difficult, but you can do it.
I've actually had that.
Yeah, it's just I have a whole deal with that. I'm from New York. I just have pizza with. I shouldn't say I'm from New York like other New Yorkers do this. I prefer my pizza with nothing on it. I'll put a side of broccoli. But see, that's my preference. Mm-hmm. And but again, tomorrow my preference will be different. Actually, when Karen orders pizza, I just eat. I'm like, okay, what do you want? I'm like, whatever you're having. She's like, no, I need to know. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna win this battle anyway, so I prefer to just you pick, and I'll just eat whatever.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, I think like what you're describing and what Ram Dass is describing is acceptance.
Yeah.
It's accept. Like when you say your preference, everything kind of becomes your preference. You learn that it's through acceptance that you change the narrative. And that you change the way that you're looking at the experience that you're having. And so when you can accept everything on its face, it takes away this has to be this way or I won't enjoy it.
Yeah, and also too, instead of like just like blankly saying I accept everything, just accept the moment you're in. Because like I could live a million lifetimes, I'm not going to have every moment or everything come my way either. So I already have a certain frequency vibration that's coming at me. My persona is there, even though there's separation from it. I'm developing the persona. But as I accept the moment, not everything in the moment, all of a sudden it's easy to gain a new preference. Because I only could prefer something based off of past experience. But yet, I'm not going to be in one moment, sitting on the beach and in the next moment being chased down by a polar bear in Alaska. I know the world doesn't act wonky like that. So it's easy then to say, okay, but someone says, well, you have to accept everything. Well, do I have to accept sitting on on an ice cap right now in my shorts? Because that's everything, right? And being chased by a polar bear. And it's like, well, no, you have to place yourself in that position to do that. Now, if you are and there's a polar bear, you must accept it in order to run.
And that's when survival
I just
kicks
think
in.
you're like, oh, I'm going to be eaten by a polar bear. Well, whether you accept that or not, it's going to happen. But like life doesn't just come at you that way. So people, when you say accept, them like, oh my God, now they like I have to accept, getting shot in the head. I'm like, well, hold on a second. I'm like, when would that situation come about? Now you're reaching for straws and going crazy in the mind. I'm like, accept the moment you're in, because the field that you're in is actually creating the moment to some degree in how you're doing it. So it then becomes easier to accept.
I feel like what you're talking about too is the mind running wild, because we categorize everything. And so in our head, as soon as we hear something, we say, well, what about this? And then we try to come up with this like crazy example of another way why this would not work. And that's kind of the pull, the tug of the mind. It's that constant, well, what about this? What about that? And we do this. We categorize constantly. So when you can see the mind from above and know that, whoa, this is how the analytical left brain side of my experience works, it's easier to let go of that and work with it. And it's not as rigid and it's not as black and white.
Yeah, and it doesn't take away the experiences, because it
enhances it.
It does. Like I mentioned someone not that long ago, I was heading to Europe, and we're hitting 4 different cities, 4 different countries, and one of them Paris. And it's funny, there's a mixed bag of people when it comes to going to Paris. Like, oh, I love it. It's my favorite city. It's like those damn Parisians. They're rude. And I get
you're
that
right
a lot.
about that. It's
yeah,
funny.
it's funny. Yeah,
that too.
it's funny. And what it is what's funny is when I've noticed over the time when people tell me this, the people that tell me that Parisians are rude, they pretty much have a rigid viewpoint on life. Like it's this or it's that.
Or that.
And I find it interesting. So I'm like, I laugh at it, and I'm going to go with an open mind as much as I can. I'm just not going to eat snails.
I think a lot of people, who play in this very rigid world have that viewpoint of, things are either one way or the other. And
a lot of it is preconceived. In other words, if somebody went and someone's like, oh, they're rude. So you go over there with this okay, you have like a 50-50 shot they're going to be rude. And all of a sudden, if you're hungry, you see the pizzeria, you see the pizza parlor, right? Mm-hmm. If you think they're rude, you're going to find the rude person. It's true. And so when you open up and you say, no, I'm going to have an experience. I want to walk and sit in a cafe and drink cafe and have this in the evening, have my wine, and then speak as much French as I know, mm-hmm. and they'll be polite to me. I will see that to a degree, right? I will, because I'm the one saying that. So when I go, some people I can actually say my trip is amazing. Like, well, I haven't gone yet. And I'm like, oh, I'm preceding. It's amazing. But when I come back, I can tell you why it was amazing. But right now, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. But when I actually live through the experience, what we call the linear perspective of time and space, when I come back on a certain date prior to the date of leaving, I'll be able to explain to you why it was amazing. But I'm already going in knowing it's going to be amazing. And I can tell you, oh, it's going to be amazing. but I can't explain to you why. But once I experience it, I'll tell you why.
Then I'll tell you why.
Yeah, and I'll come back. Oh, they were freaking rude. And that's good.
Then I'll give you the
Yeah.
list of reasons.
Yeah.
I saw this. I was watching this show. I believe it was Open Minds, that one with Regina Meredith.
Yeah.
She was interviewing somebody, and they were talking about the double slit experiment. And I'm sure you guys have heard Frank and I talk about this, many a time in the past. But essentially, it's the theory that it's proven that when we observe something is when we break it down into matter, when it becomes matter. It's not until we observe a wave does it collapse into something that is measurable. And so what the scientists, this group of scientists did, they said, okay, so we know that the double slit experiment has proven that. Well, what if the observer, the thing measuring, is observed, okay? And so now it's observing, the observer, all right? And so they do this experiment, and naturally we would think, okay, if this one's observing this one, whatever these two observe is going to be the exact same. And what happened was they were both extremely different. This first observer observed the situation this way. The second one observed it in an entirely different fashion. It did not collect the same data. Mm-hmm. And so what that shows us is that we are not living in a objective world. We're living very much so in a subjective world. If two observers are experiencing two totally different things, why would the data not be the same? The only way to prove that, or the only answer to that is, there is no one way. There is no only one experience. And that is honestly what Ram Dass is talking about.
Yeah.
It's, hey, yes, we're here, we're in this room, but the way I'm experiencing this room is very different from the way Frank is experiencing this room. And so to say that we're in an objective world, it's funny because we really think we are. Media does this all the time. Like schooling does this to us. We think that there's only one way, 2 + 2 = 4, etc. every single time. And so we condition ourselves to live in this objective world when in reality it's quite the opposite. It's very subjective. And as soon as we loosen up on this tight grip that everything is either one way or the other, black or white, that's when we can kind of experience all this reality has to offer.
Yeah, it becomes, instead of this or that, it becomes this and that.
Exactly.
Because the subjective without objective wouldn't have any point.
That's it.
So when I'm subjective about something, then I create this object to experience it. And then I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then I want to share it with somebody and like, oh, how do you like this piece of music I made? Like, it's okay. It's like, what do you mean it's okay? It was a freaking great piece of music, It's like, and if you pay them enough money, they'll like it.
Politics at its finest.
Exactly. So,
Yeah. I just thought that was such a cool thing that they did with the experiment, doing an observer of the observer for that double slit experiment. It shows us that data's not going to come back, information's not going to come back the same way for everyone.
All right, so what Mike just, to kind of go off of what Mike just said, this is where the beautiful moment in time comes. Because why, as individuals, I have gotten bored is because if this is how it is, it's like, okay, this is the only movie playing. The first time was great, the second time was okay. All of a sudden, after a while, it becomes boring and eventually going to hate the movie. But because I can add in every moment, everything's changing. And you could have like Hamlet, but you could have 100 movies made by different directors and different actors about just a very simple play of Hamlet. And you can watch it and they're like, yeah, I get the theme. But I like this setting, I like this timeline, and because they could do whatever timeline you want, not just based on what Shakespeare thought it to be. And it could broaden your perspective. So the reason the universe is set up this way is so we do not get bored with life in the experiential aspect. But if you're trying to hold on to something, you suffer because the universe is already meant to expand. And everything that you're watching becomes a fleeting moment. But no worries. It's like the monkey bar theory, which me and Mike haven't talked about in a while. But when I go to grab the next bar, I naturally let go of the bar behind me. And then as I'm grabbing this one, I'm moving for this one. I'm constantly grabbing and letting go. And then when I get really good at it, I'm barely holding on. I'm touching it. I'm barely holding on. And it's so momentum of life that creates the idea of success. But how do I know momentum until I hold stagnant? And nothing's really stagnant. Everything's moving at vibration. But nonetheless, there's this flow and a movement. So whether I'm happy or whether I'm somber, I learn to accept it, and they're brilliant moments. But if I'm always trying to get happy, you're going to be somber for a while. The opposite tends to happen.
It's a chase.
And if you actually accept somber, you're going to be happy. There's power within the field of paradox. And in the physical world, paradox is poignant because the objective world, the physical world, when you look at it, it literally is reflecting to us backwards and upside down from the actual standpoint, because the screen we're looking at is concave, right? So we live on a round planet, and the atmosphere then is round, so the reflection, it has a concave look. So if anyone takes a spoon, I use this example on a client the other day. They had a sunglass, and I says, look at the inside of your sunglasses. And you look at yourself, and they looked at it. I'm like, you're upside down and backwards. So if you're trying to gather information upside and backwards, you're getting it in that weird way. So when you start to do that, I'm like, wow. I'm like, everything is upside down backwards, so I want that to flee. So I want to add something else to it. But I look at the outside world and say, oh, I like that. Continue. I'm done with that. Let's go this way. But people say, no, this is how it has to be. It's here. Look, it's here. I'm like, no, I get that. But this is here. And once I turn my head, it's no longer here. This is here. Mm-hmm. And this is here. I get to say that. And if we live and let live, and people start to understand this, the natural balance of life, I need other people's perspective in order for my perspective to grow. I need to go to Paris. I need to go here in order to have an expansive perspective on this stuff. I shouldn't say I need to. I prefer to. Because I don't really need to. I could sit in a farmhouse and just stare at the wall for a lifetime.
Even though that would probably be the least enjoyable.
Yeah.
But when
you never know.
Well, when you bring up the concave thing, I think that's a good thing to point out to, listeners and people at home. You're taking something that's outside of you and you're trying to make it real. You're trying to make it work. So like if we know that what we're experiencing is just something that's coming from within us and is projected out in front of us, flipped up, and how we're processing it,
and then trying to say it's real.
Yeah, we're trying to say something outside of us is real that's not. And that's where what Frank's getting at, right?
Now, let me the experience, the way I feel about it is the reality. Mm-hmm. So like when you go to a movie, you're watching the screen, you realize, okay, you could watching a car chase. And like how big is the screen in a theater? I don't know.
Oh, it's big. I don't know. 10 by 10?
All right.
I don't know. It's got to be way bigger than that.
Yeah, way bigger than that. Just say it's, 40 by 30, whatever. Well, how can a car chase be experienced on a 40 by 30 screen? It's an illusion.
And this happens all the time.
But you get caught up in it. You're like, oh my God, that car's going fast. And especially when they got into the 3D abilities. Yep. Like you think, like you're sitting in a movie theater and a spear comes at you, everyone in the movie theater jocks ahead. I'm like, that's the illusion. It really is. But that's what the physical world does to it. It makes us feel like we're in it. You don't want to disconnect completely. You want to get caught up in it, but realize this isn't who I am, because the reason is all fear comes from the understanding of death. So everything in the outside world's fleeting. So if I attach myself to it, that's the death of me. Even this corporeal body's changed. God knows it's changed since I was in high school. Mm-hmm. So that high school, a kid that graduated Calhoun High School and, back in the 80s, is no longer here. Mm-hmm. All right. But there's something in this corporeal body or surrounding the corporeal body, however you want to look at it, that has never disappeared. So we
never will.
Never will. So So that's Ram Dass is trying to say, give your attention to that, but still play with this. Because from the moment of the attention of that, this becomes playful and fun. Otherwise, if you're only giving attention to the screen and you don't like what you're seeing, ripping down the screen doesn't do any more to the film in the projector. It makes it more difficult to watch. Now it's just shined on a black wall typically behind it, and you can still see the imagery, but it's rather faint, and like shit. It was a shitty movie, but I'd rather seen it on a white screen, because now I can't even see its full content and texture of it and everything else. But the truth is, give more attention, understanding, awareness to the inner world, and the outer world becomes beautiful. It's not about denying the outer world. It's understanding why the outer world, like, oh, this sucks. I'm like, oh, whoa, something in here must think it sucks. Does it really suck? Or you gathered enough information and you think you know enough to know this shouldn't happen. And the intellect becomes a danger. And the thing about starting out Richard Alpert and going into Ram Dass is, what he did is, he's the same person, same smile, same humor. He's always been funny.
He has been.
But he's then Richard Alpert would be the outside world, Ram Dass would be the inner world. And he's still enjoying, he's still intellectually sound, he's still doing this, but he tends to laugh a little bit more at, at the silly stuff.
Not take it so seriously.
And again, he passed away in 2019. But at the time, it's like everything just was, now it's like you can actually make fun of yourself or be light with yourself, and then you enjoy yourself. And when you enjoy yourself, guess what? You enjoy everyone around you. No matter how miserable that person's miserable, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of funny, the misery, and then you start laughing about it. And I've been with people that oh, I like that, and I start laughing, they start laughing,
and it feels good.
Yeah, they like, how do you get me to laugh? I'm like, because I didn't get you to laugh. You chose to laugh. You did it. I started laughing and you laughed, and I found what you're saying was pretty funny. I'm like, oh, you got back pain.
That's funny.
Yeah, you must have a wife and kids. No. Just kidding, Karen. I hope you're laughing later.
Seriously.
Karen has a great sense of humor, so I get away with that sometimes.
Oh, you got it. You got it. I love that you brought that up, though, because that is what Ram Dass marries so well. He explains, yes, there is this aspect of suffering in this reality, in this third dimensional plane, in what we're experiencing. So we're not here to deny that there's suffering. There is suffering. There's rape, there's child molestation, there's all of these horrible things. And then on the flip side, what he's saying is, what people made these attachments to these ideas of like a family, these attachments that we have to this suffering, where does it end? And what he means by that is like, okay, so let's eradicate hunger, from the world. Okay, well, where do we go next? Because there's a lot more pain and suffering out there than just hunger. And it's going to be this never-ending chase, because suffering does not just disappear. And we have this world where we're taught, we need to get out there and change the world. But in reality, you're going to go out and you're going to change something out there, and there's going to be a next suffering, a next type of thing that we must focus on. And there's no way to eradicate suffering. And so when you can detach from the idea that this should not be happening this way, when you can detach from that there is this ought not to be happening, this should not, it can appear cold to people, and it appears like you don't care. Like, okay, somebody comes up to you and tells you they're going to kill yourself, like Dr. Hawkins, in one of our last episodes, and he says so. He's removing the attachment to the drama of this person's going to kill themselves, I better intervene, otherwise I'm partially responsible for this person taking their life. No, that's getting caught in the drama. But to say it like that in this third dimensional plane seems very callous and cold, like, oh, what do you mean you don't want to help the other? But it's not. And that's what Ram Dass is pointing out, is like it's a balance of these two worlds.
Yeah, because at some level, like, getting back to that, like even like with Dr. Hawkins, when he said that, he was saying that in a reference point of the person he was bringing up to wasn't in a suicidal place. But what he was saying is you should feel so, but yet you don't respond to the person, because we have to respond to the if you want to be really good at this, expand at this, you have to respond to the person that's in front of you in the communication. So when I go to Paris, if I just try to speak, if I just refuse to speak French,
Yeah.
this is where it becomes problematic. So, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So whoever I'm in front of with, I take serious. So if someone's in front of me with a lot of drama, I'll go into it. But there's something in me that is already detached from it. I don't get sucked down that hole. And if I don't get sucked down that hole, I could see a little window over here, a doorway. And as they're talking to me, I'm like walking towards the door. I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting problem you got there. And I'm walking towards the door, and I open the door, and they're like, holy shit. And all of a sudden the problem goes away. But if I get stuck in the drama, I can't find the door or the window I need to get through with them. So, but I engage. I don't just say so and walk over to the window or door myself. No, I'm like, yeah. I'm like, oh, wow. But there's something in me that's detached that I can see the window or the door, and this is just a metaphor of getting out of. I can get them and me out of it, just like people have done that for me. So it's this play we do. You don't be like, I'm a spiritual person. I don't have time for this drama nonsense. No. I'm like, oh, tell me your drama. Tell me how bad it is. Oh, yeah, I fully understand. It's I went through something just like that. And all of a sudden, it just dissipates. Matter of fact, the next clip is going to explain this brilliantly.
I love that.
It's a story that Ram Dass had written in a book about a friend of his, but it's one of the greatest stories. I almost tear up every time I hear the story. I've heard it several times. And let's start with that. It's going to take you in. The story's going to explain what I was trying to explain far greater, I believe. All right.
Let's jump into it.
Let's do it.
There is a quality of your behavior that changes as you cultivate these planes of awareness in yourself that can be called spiritual or altered states of consciousness. And as you integrate them into your life, you begin to become not only appreciative of the universe around you, including your own human heart and its pain, and you live with the paradox of suffering is grace, and at the same moment, from a human point of view, suffering hurts, and I'll do what I can to relieve it. You learn. At the same moment, you begin to become responsive rather than reactive. That is, when you're lost in your mind, somebody does something and there's a habit that reacts. The minute there is awareness or equanimity, a stimulus comes at you and it goes into the totality, into emptiness. And out of the gestalt or the total situation, an appropriate response occurs. Not reactive just to that stimulus, but responsive to the total situation. Let me read you one story, and I'm getting near a break, so those of you that have had more than enough, you can. This is a story told. This is in my most recent book, How Can I Help, that I did with Paul Gorman. It's an extraordinarily good book. This is a story told to me by a friend who is a master of Aikido. The train clanked and rattled through the suburbs of Tokyo on a drowsy spring afternoon. Our car was comparatively empty. A few housewives with their kids in tow, some old folks going shopping. I gazed absently at the drab houses and dusty hedgerows. At one station, the doors opened, and suddenly the afternoon quiet was shattered by a man bellowing violent, incomprehensible curses. The man staggered into our car. He wore laborer's clothing, and he was big, drunk, and dirty. Screaming, he swung at a woman holding a baby. The blow sent her spinning into the laps of an elderly couple. It was a miracle that the baby was unharmed. Terrified, the couple jumped up and scrambled towards the other end of the car. The laborer aimed a kick at the retreating back of the old woman, but missed as she scuttled to safety. This so enraged the drunk that he grabbed the metal pole in the center of the car and tried to wrench it out of its stanchion. I could see that one of his hands was cut and bleeding. The train lurched ahead, the passengers frozen with fear. I stood up. I was young then, some 20 years ago, and in pretty good shape. I'd been putting in a solid 8 hours of Aikido training nearly every day for the past 3 years. I liked to throw and grapple. I thought I was tough. The trouble was my martial skill was untested in actual combat. As students of Aikido, we were not allowed to fight. Aikido, my teacher had said again and again, is the art of reconciliation. Whoever has the mind to fight has broken his connection with the universe. If you try to dominate people, you're already defeated. We studied how to resolve conflict, not how to start it. I listened to his words. I tried hard. I even went so far as to cross the street to avoid the pinball punks who lounged around the train stations. My forbearance exalted me. I felt both tough and holy. In my heart, however, I wanted an absolutely legitimate opportunity whereby I might save the innocent by destroying the guilty. This is it, I said to myself as I got to my feet. People are in danger. If I don't do something fast, somebody will probably get hurt. Seeing me stand up, the drunk recognized a chance to focus his rage. "Aha!" he roared. "A foreigner! You need a lesson in Japanese manners." I held on lightly to the commuter strap overhead and gave him a slow look of disgust and dismissal. I planned to take this turkey apart, but he had to make the first move. I wanted him mad, so I pursed my lips and blew him an insolent kiss. "All right," he hollered. "You're going to get a lesson." He gathered himself for a rush at me. A fraction of a second before he could move, someone shouted, "Hey!" It was ear-splitting. I remember the strangely joyous, lilting quality of it, as though you and a friend had been searching diligently for something, and he had suddenly stumbled upon it. "Hey!" I wheeled to my left, the drunk spun to his right. We both stared down at a little old Japanese man. He must have been well into his 70s, this tiny gentleman sitting there immaculate in his kimono. He took no notice of me, but beamed delightedly at the laborer, as though he had a most important, most welcome secret to share. "Come here," the old man said in easy vernacular. "Come here and talk with me." The big man followed as if on a string. He planted his feet belligerently in front of the old gentleman and roared above the clacking wheels, "Why the hell should I talk to you?" The drunk now had his back to me. If his elbow moved so much as a millimeter, I'd drop him in his socks. The old man continued to beam at the laborer. "What you been drinking?" he asked, his eyes sparkling with interest. "I've been drinking sake," the laborer bellowed back, "and it's none of your business." Flecks of spittle spattered the old man. "Oh, that's wonderful," the old man said. "Absolutely wonderful. You see, I love sake, too. Every night, me and my wife, she's 76, you know, we take a little bottle of sake and we go out in the garden and we sit on our bench and we watch to see how our persimmon tree is doing. My grandfather planted that persimmon tree and we've been very concerned about it after the ice storms we had last winter. But you know, it's done better than you could expect when you consider the poor nature of the soil. Do you know we go out with our sake even when it rains?" He looked up at the laborer, his eyes twinkling. As he struggled to follow the old man's conversation, the drunk's face began to soften. His fists slowly unclenched. "Yeah," he said, "I love persimmons, too." His voice trailed off. "Yes," said the old man, smiling, "and I'm sure you have a wonderful wife." "No," replied the laborer. "My wife died." Very gently, swaying with the motion of the train, the big man began to sob. "I don't got no wife. I don't got no home. I don't got no job. I'm so ashamed of myself." Tears rolled down his cheeks. A spasm of despair rippled through his body. Now it was my turn, standing there in my well-scrubbed youthful innocence, my make this world safe for democracy righteousness. I suddenly felt dirtier than he was.
Then the train arrived at my stop. As the doors opened, I heard the old man cluck sympathetically. My, he said, that is a difficult problem. Sit down here and tell me about it. I turned my head for one last look. The laborer was sprawled on the seat, his head in the old man's lap. The old man was softly stroking the filthy, matted hair. As the train pulled away, I sat down on a bench. What I had wanted to do with muscle had been accomplished with love. I had just seen Aikido in combat.
Wow. So, yeah. So that guy, in that story what we were talking about earlier, he listened to him but walked him over to a window to show him there's another way. And it wasn't the drunk. It was the guy that wanted the Aikido. So when we get into it, we have a choice to get into something. You don't disassociate. You don't say this is right or wrong. There's a way to transmute anything. We become alchemists. We all don't want the violence. Even the guy that was creating the violence didn't want it. And the guy that knew Aikido didn't want it, but he felt he had to. It was the only way. But there's other ways, and this story tells us, and that's what Ram Dass's life was about. He was teaching us there's other ways. There's easier ways. There's more subtle ways. You know?
And it never has to be the way of violence.
No, it could be the way of violence, but we see how that goes. Everyone knows how violence goes. It's disruptive.
We naturally don't want or enjoy that experience, I should say.
So how could we learn to be the Japanese man sitting on that train? Right?
I think we all can learn a lot from that.
Yeah, and that's the brilliance of that story. So,
like you're saying with the the window or the door, it's giving people just enough space to let go of that current narrative that has them wound so tight where they're ready to physically snap.
Yeah, give your full attention to someone without judging that. And when you do that, so when this guy was like inside, he was like, so what, you're angry? He doesn't care. He didn't blame him for hitting that woman with the child. But he turned and changed everything in that moment. And it's like, wow. And that's the power we really possess. Everything else is force. But that's the true power. And, listen to Ram Dass all these years. I listened to it for a very long time. I still, every day, I still get more and more out of it. It never ends. So, yeah.
I do think that's one of those things about, Ram Dass, because me too, I listened to stuff I listened to a year and a half ago, and I still will hear it from a new perspective, or it will ring a little bit different for me. And there's just these little things, subtle different things that maybe I never picked up on before, but are so powerful to me when I hear it that time. And that's because, we experience things as we need to.
Yeah. And, I haven't, heard the story before, and anyone I ever presented the story for, they all had the same expression, like, wow. So I believe there's something inherent in every human being that sees the power in that. Whether or not they think that it exists in the world or can exist, it's great in the story, but they recognize it. And then it's about becoming that elderly Japanese person.
Well, that is true strength.
Yeah.
So we have this very odd way of having what I'll call justified grievances within our cultural society that are seen as permissible, seen as allowed. Hey, I would feel that way. Even like with the Will Smith thing, there was half the crowd saying, hey, good for him. He's defending his woman. Oh, my God.
And the thing is even those perspectives aren't wrong.
No.
They just, in the end, don't work.
Exactly.
From the understanding of how things are, it never ends. But because even the person that we want to become wouldn't even judge the person that said, I would have done the same thing.
Well, like this guy, he, if anybody would have walked up and clocked this drunk gentleman, who, put a woman in danger, with a swinging, fighting, no one would think it's inappropriate to to go up there and take him down.
But
you
then-
know?
yeah.
That's what we've been conditioned to believe
but
as
when
a
you
society.
see that power, it supersedes everything.
True power.
It goes beyond that.
True power.
Yeah.
You know, to think that, you know, we have these justified, you know, grievances or things that are okay, you know, this should be allowed because that's wrong. If you find yourself in that position, often it's the type of thing, it's a learning moment that there is no justified grievance. There is no just because, you know, and you'll see this like with people, you know, maybe they were a child abuser or, you know, or maybe they raped somebody and, oh yeah, who cares if they get killed in jail, you know, and they'll talk about things like this and you'll see it in society and it's almost like approved of, like it's okay to say things like that. But then we're sinking right down to that level. And that's kind of where this story goes is, hey, we don't ever need to hurt another. And there is no justified hurt that we can inflict upon somebody that is righteous. And Ram Dass talks about this a lot, you know, this righteousness that we have as like human beings. Like that is very much so the ego playing out. And yes, you know, there's multitudes of, you know, emotion and feeling behind this, but at the core of it, it's not who or what we are.
Yeah.
And we have the ability to, like Frank just mentioned, be those alchemists, transmute that energy into something that is honestly beneficial to all.
Yeah. And we have to express it to everyone, not just to the people we like.
No, absolutely.
Because I think that's what happens a lot of times. And it, you know, at times it can be very difficult. So when we're very responsive, it's easy. So the only true way to be responsive, from what I understand, is to be present. Otherwise, you become reactive. And when you become reactive, a lot of times reactive aspects are justified. Because even like what happens when people do stuff, the justification, if you take it from this point now, half the people think it was bad, half the people think it was good. And if you go back 50 years ago, it would probably be like, you know, 2/3 thought it was good, 1/3, you know, you go back 100 years, like it would have been 99% of people think it was good, the other 5%, you know. It's where we are and how is the swaying happening, right? Now, the truth is, that Japanese guy disarmed that man. But he did it gently, and even everyone watching it, whatever pain they gathered, whatever anger they got, he took it from them as well, not just from the drunk guy. He took it and absorbed it, but he didn't take it in himself. He allowed it to go out the window. So, because if the guy did take him down to keto, and I've been there before, even if you overcame someone physically, you still had to carry that energy. You took that anger and put it on yourself. Now you have to carry it, even if it was justified. I got to walk around with that. And you don't like that. I'd never liked the feeling of it. But yeah, people are like, oh, you did a good thing. I'm like, yeah, I don't say anything, but I don't feel like I did a good thing. I don't like the way it feels. And then after a while, you shake it off, But if I could have done that, I could have felt good in the moment in which I was doing it, every moment afterwards, And that's, that's the subtlety of life. That's the brilliance of it, I'm not there. That's why I still listen to that story. But,
That was a really powerful story.
Yeah, it was a powerful story, yeah. But that story sums up Ram Dass.
It does.
It really does. He was a gentle soul. He's very funny, laughed, never knocked anyone. If you presented him like, what do you think about this person? He would tell you a story and try to see, well, what do you think happened to them as a child? Why do you think they got that way? And all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I'm not justifying what they did by any means, but can you look at it that way? And all of a sudden he adds this subtle perspective without even getting angry at him and be like, wow, I never looked at it from that viewpoint. Yeah, either. And then he'll be like, yeah, either did I. It wasn't like he was preconceiving it. He just naturally flew into these, like, wow, yeah, that is interesting. And all of a sudden you felt at home. You felt comfortable. It's like, wow, it's an amazing gift that he had.
Well, Ram Dass also has one of my favorite quotes. I'm going to butcher it, but it's picture everybody that you come encounter with, picture everybody that you meet as God in drag. And I love that because it has so much to do with his like hippie counterculture, 60s, 70s vibe, and just, you know, the way that's phrased. But ultimately what he's saying to picture everybody as if it's God in drag is you can see yourself in everyone. You can see God in everyone.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking for. Like or that's how we should be relating to this life, not saying, hey, you are separate from me, you are different from me, but more so finding the commonality and common ground between one another.
Yeah.
And that's true growth, that's true maturity, that's true power, that's true love.
And every human being momentarily does that, whether they're aware of it or not. But we do. Like, but if you could do it more on a consistent basis or a conscious basis of looking at everyone as a family member or you know, Mother Teresa. I remember hearing this, but when Mother Teresa was in Calcutta, you know, she came from a very wealthy family.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she did, and she chose to go to Calcutta, being one of the poorest places on the earth, but she would see everyone in filth laying on the street as if they were Jesus. And so that was her way, like that was her guide. And, you know, if that's Jesus, how can I hate that person? How can I feel sorry for that person? You know, so she saw the Christ in every one of us.
I'm glad you said that because we're kind of made conditioned to believe we need to feel sorry, but that in itself is a judgment.
It is. It's a judgment. It's a subtle judgment, but it doesn't help that person.
But it's also an ego judgment.
Yeah.
Like I'm putting myself above that feeling. I don't deserve to feel that way. Says who? Says the ego.
And the tone of that story where he's talking about the Japanese guy, he didn't feel sorry, man. He wasn't angry at the guy. He's like, oh, so that type. It's like, you know,
which is cool.
Wow, yeah. And we get into that subtle place. It's amazing how you see everything coming. So it would almost be like a 2-year-old swinging at your head. You either get hit by it or you move from it, but you don't take it personal. They're two. Well, you don't like turn around, crack the 2-year-old kid. They're 2 years old. But yet, because they're 22, I got to take that personally. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, you know, you don't have to.
I got to prove something. Yeah, I can't let somebody treat me like that.
And
do they know who I am?
Yeah, and again, you know, someone threw a punch at you. I'm like, well, I'll do the best I can to duck. And I'm working on not taking it personal. I'm like, but as I sit here and talk about this, I'm still working on getting to that place, but you know, life keeps making it personal for me. The more I laugh, a lot of what I took personally years ago, I don't take personal anymore. But I still have a whole plethora of stuff. I have a list, you know. Karen lets me know.
Well, this episode will definitely not be our last episode on Richard Alpert.
No, definitely not. Yeah, there's too much to cover about him.
There is. I mean, I can think of 5 to 6 different things that I haven't even gotten the chance to bring up that just blow me away about this gentleman. And so we'll definitely be doing another episode on him in the future.
All right, and that's Perspective Shift with Ram Dass. If you've never listened to him, heard about him, I suggest, again, I mentioned a lot. There's a ton of information out there on YouTube.
Check out his book, Be Here Now.
Be Here Now, yeah. Mm-hmm. He's got several books, but that one is a really good one. Mm-hmm. And just I like listening to him because, just listening to him is like a meditation. Listen. Yeah.
You naturally feel better, too.
Oh, yeah.
I know, like, there's just something about the way he speaks.
The tonality of his voice.
And peaceful. And it's like, hey, I don't need to struggle. I don't need to fight. I don't need to, compare,
Yeah, it's true. All right. Well, hope you guys enjoyed the show this week.
We'll see you guys next week. If you like what you heard, go ahead and click the subscribe button below. You can shoot us an email at perspectiveshift2020@gmail.com or leave us a comment beneath this video. Thanks, guys.
Peace out.
See you next week.
All right.